Hey there, Silver Recaps here. Watch out. The story begins with a girl named Sydney, who is shown to be a cheerful and lively person. When Sydney was just 9 years old, her mother passed away, and she was raised by her father, Paul. Paul worked as a plumber, and when it came time to explain sensitive topics like periods to Sydney, he used pipes and plumbing analogy. While it was an unusual approach, it reflected Paul's dedication to raising his daughter the best way he could. Paul did everything within his power to ensure Sydney had a good upbringing, but like every girl, Sydney missed her mother at times. Growing up, Sydney was surrounded by her father's co-workers and became close to all of them. One day, she received a scholarship letter offering her admission to SIU, the same college her mother had attended. Along with this, she was invited to join her mother's sorority group, Kappa. This news made Paul and his co-workers emotional as they realized Sydney was about to embark on a new chapter in her life. As Sydney prepared to leave, she opened a special box her mother had left for her. Inside, she found a letter in which her mother had written about her experiences during her own college days. In the letter, her mother advised Sydney to live every moment to the fullest and assured her that the friends she would make in college would be lifelong companions. When Sydney arrived at the college, she met her roommate, Demetria Rosemed, also known as Tinky. Coincidentally, Tinky was also planning to join the Kappa sorority. This connection helped them bond instantly, and the two became fast friends. Next, we are introduced to Rachel, the head of the student council, who is notorious for her controlling and harsh behavior. Rachel logs into the university's website, where a list of the most attractive students is displayed, and she notices that she ranks at the top of the list. Rachel has a crush on a popular student named Taylor, who happens to be the leader of a prominent social group. Both Rachel and Taylor's fathers are trustees of the college and contribute 80% of the university's funds, which gives them a significant reputation and special treatment from the college staff. It is revealed that Rachel and Taylor are collaborating on a project called the Greek Life Center. Their plan involves constructing a new building for wealthy students, for which they intend to demolish an old building named Vertex. Vertex is home to a group of students who are considered outcasts and are often mocked as dogs by others on campus. Meanwhile, Sydney and Tinky are walking through the campus where a large crowd has gathered. Taylor and his friends are watching the new students, and one of Taylor's friends attempts to bully a student by throwing a ball at him. However, before the ball can hit the student, Sydney catches it mid-air, impressing Taylor. He approaches Sydney and introduces himself. Taylor offers to show Sydney around the campus, including the college grounds and various facilities. As they tour, Taylor also explains the different sorority and fraternity groups on campus. He starts by describing Gamma Phi and then moves on to talk about Omega, giving Sydney a glimpse into the college's diverse social scene. As Taylor continues showing Sydney around campus, they reach the Kappa Phi new house, led by Rachel. When Rachel sees Taylor and Sydney together, she instantly dislikes Sydney. When Sydney enters the Kappa group, two girls, Katie and Christy, approach her and introduce her to Rachel. Rachel looks at Sydney and says she's not worthy of being part of the Kappa group. Sydney doesn't care about Rachel's opinion, and her carefree attitude surprises Katie and Christy. They also begin to question if they even belong in Kappa themselves. To join the Kappa group, all the girls are assigned tasks. Since no one likes Sydney, she is forced to complete all the tasks on her own. During this process, Sydney learns that Taylor is soon going to become a campus lawyer, and that Rachel is planning to make him a member of her group. However, this news doesn't bother Sydney at all. Later that night, Rachel and her group enter the rooms of the new students, waking them up for their first test. Rachel tells all the girls they must immediately ask a boy out on a date. She also forbids them from using makeup, brushing their hair, or fixing their appearance in any way. She instructs everyone to meet her at State Street Diner with their date within 15 minutes. Sydney becomes nervous and starts searching for someone to take as her date. After searching for a while, she finds a boy named Lenny, who is a bookworm. She quickly asks Lenny to go on a date with him. Before Lenny can even respond, Sydney grabs him and manages to reach the diner at the designated time, even arriving early. Afterward, Rachel gives Sydney another task and tells her that she must leave Lenny. Sydney refuses, saying she won't do it because Lenny is a good guy. Rachel then forces her to choose between Lenny and the Kappa group. Sydney has no choice but to comply. While this is happening, Lenny goes to the bathroom, and when he returns, he finds that everyone has left. To make matters worse, Lenny ends up having to pay the entire bill himself. Sydney, having been raised to be strong and independent, performs all the tasks better than the other girls. In doing so, she unknowingly inspires the other girls to resist Rachel's unfair treatment. This infuriates Rachel, but she can't do much about it. Meanwhile, Sydney starts growing closer to Taylor, and he finds her kind and sweet. One day, Sydney meets Lenny again and apologizes for what happened. She explains that she only left because of the test. However, Lenny doesn't forgive her and walks away. Later, Rachel gathers all the girls and announces that the task phase is almost over and that they will soon become Kappa sisters. She mentions that the next day, a traditional program will be held where the official Kappa sisters will be announced. At this event, Rachel chooses the winner, who will receive a special dress for the program. When Rachel sees that Sydney is the winner, it annoys her. To sabotage Sydney, Rachel gives her a black dress, hoping it will make her look bad in front of everyone. The next day, Sydney shows up at the program wearing the dress. To her surprise, Taylor approaches her, compliments her look, and asks her to dance. During the program, Rachel officially announces the names of the new Kappa sisters and pins badges on them, completing the initiation. When it's Sydney's turn to be pinned as a Kappa sister, Rachel suddenly makes a lame excuse and kicks Sydney out of the group. To humiliate her further, Rachel announces in front of everyone that Sydney's father is a plumber and even demands Sydney return the dress she was given. Furious, Sydney removes the dress in front of everyone, throws it at Rachel, and storms out. In the pouring rain, Sydney sits outside, soaking and upset. That's when Lenny and his friends find her and invite her to stay with them. Lenny introduces her to his group of friends. First, there's Terrence, who is extremely intelligent, Spanky, who is shy, George, who behaves childishly, Billy, who is exhausted from a recent flight, and Jeremy, who has a thing for girls. The rest of the college considers them misfits, calling them fools, but they are far from it. They warmly welcome Sydney to their space in Vertex. Sydney soon moves into their rundown house and grows close to all of them. One day, she suggests they repair Vertex, but the group dismisses the idea out of fear of Rachel. Meanwhile, Rachel notices Sydney's name climb to the number 2 spot on the university's list of the most attractive students, which makes her furious. As the college elections approach, Sydney brings nomination forms for her new friends, encouraging them to run. However, they all refuse due to their lack of confidence and reservations. Sydney then gives an inspiring speech, boosting their self-esteem and convincing them to participate. The group starts preparing election posters and sets up a campaign stall to explain their goals to the students. Terrence leads the effort, sharing their mission to repair Vertex and improve the campus while aiming to remove Rachel from the student council. During this time, Tinky visits their stall to apologize to Sydney and begins flirting with Lenny. As Rachel passes by, she stops at the stall and mocks them, claiming they'll never win. However, Sydney ignores her taunts. In the next scene, Sydney is studying in the library when Taylor approaches her with flowers and asks her out on a date. Sydney declines at first, but when Taylor starts singing loudly, she agrees just to stop him from causing a scene. Taylor takes Sydney to a shelter where he feeds homeless children, which deeply impresses her. They enjoy their time together, eating dinner while watching the sunset and having fun. When Sydney returns to Vertex, her friends tease her about the date, but she refuses to share any details as punishment for spying on her. Meanwhile, Rachel confronts Taylor in his room, accusing Sydney of using the election as a way to defeat them. Taylor refuses to listen and asks Rachel to leave. Back at Vertex, Sydney and her friends are watching TV when a news segment about the upcoming election features their group and highlights their efforts. Sydney and her group run in the election under the name Freedom to the Seventh Power, focusing on change and inclusivity. Unlike Rachel, who values only popularity and appearances, Sydney's group stands for fairness and normalcy, earning her immense respect from the students. Eventually, Sydney climbs to the top of the most attractive student list, which infuriates Rachel further. Rachel decides she must humiliate Sydney in front of everyone. Later, Taylor visits Vertex and invites everyone to an upcoming party. Initially, Sydney's group is reluctant, as they've never attended such events before. However, Taylor convinces them to join. At the party, everyone enjoys themselves until Rachel arrives. She humiliates the boys by forcing them to strip, leaving them standing there embarrassed. Rachel then reveals to Sydney that Terrence cannot run in the election because he graduated 6 years ago and is only staying on campus to gain additional experience. Rachel also exposes her and Taylor's plan to demolish Vertex for their Greek Life Center project. Hearing this devastates Sydney, and she leaves the party, refusing to let Taylor explain. Things worsen when the city's Board of Health issues an order to vacate Vertex due to its poor condition. The group blames Sydney for everything, claiming their lives were better before she arrived. Even Sydney's closest friends turn against her. The next day, the dogs group disbands and leaves Vertex one by one, feeling hopeless. During this time, Sydney's father, Paul, visits her. Heartbroken, Sydney explains everything to him, and Paul listens patiently. He then comforts Sydney, telling her how proud he is of her, and revealing that her mother was not just a Kappa member, but much more than that. Inspired by his words, Sydney visits the dogs the next day, urging them to stand up and run in the election again. Initially hesitant, the group changes their minds when Sydney motivates them, saying they need to fight against Rachel's tyranny. With renewed determination, they prepare for the election, and Sydney decides to run for president herself. The team promotes their campaign online, gaining widespread support, which shakes Rachel's confidence. The day before the election debate, Rachel hires a hacker to steal Sydney's data. When Sydney finds out, she panics but refuses to give up. She spends the entire night in the library working hard to prepare for the debate. Exhausted, she falls asleep there. On election day, the voting begins, but the dogs can't find Sydney anywhere. Taylor eventually finds her sleeping in the library and wakes her up with a kiss. Sydney rushes to the stage just in time and is surprised to see a massive crowd of students cheering for her. Sydney delivers an inspiring speech during the debate, sharing her journey and motivating others. One by one, her friends speak up, expressing their pride in being part of the dogs. Even the Kappa sisters, who were once under Rachel's influence, choose to support Sydney and vote to remove Rachel from the student council. Despite Rachel's promises of expensive gifts to those who vote for her, the students rally behind Sydney. She wins the election, and her group begins repairing Vertex. Everyone, including Paul and his co-workers, pitches in to help. In the end, Sydney and Taylor start dating, as do Lenny and Tinky. George, to everyone's surprise, is proposed to by a beautiful cheerleader. Meanwhile, Terrence arrives in his luxury car, announcing that he sold one of his creative ideas for $10 million, leaving everyone amazed. As her mother had once predicted, Sydney now has lifelong friends who stand by her side. The story concludes with Sydney and her friends living happily, cherishing the changes they've brought to their lives and their community.